You got exactly 24 hours to tear down that monstrosity, or I'm dialing the sheriff myself. That was the HOA president shrieking at me seconds before I dropped the one secret that would shatter her entire empire. Picture this. I'm 3 days into framing my dream cabin when this woman charges onto my property, clipboard in one hand, pure venom in the other. Victoria Ashworth, self-appointed HOA royalty, ordered me to demolish everything because it supposedly violates community standards. Pine sap was still sticky on my hands, her overpowering designer perfume choking the fresh mountain air, while more furious neighbors rolled up in their gleaming SUVs, gravel popping under expensive tires. She's flapping official-looking documents, promising six-figure fines, acting like the whole valley belongs to her personally. What she didn't realize was that I was holding information that would flip the entire power dynamic in one brutal instant. Information that would transform her threats into the costliest miscalculation of her life. But before I reveal exactly how one phone call legally demolished an entire HOA, drop a comment below. What would you do if neighbors try to steal the land you rightfully own? And tell me what part of the world you're watching from right now. HOA horror stories connect us all. Let me rewind and show you exactly how this nightmare kicked off. I'm Marcus Brennan, 45, freshly divorced electrician who inherited 5 acres of pristine Colorado mountain land from my eccentric Uncle Silas. After endless courtroom battles and months trapped in a suffocating city apartment, this property felt like a lifeline. Somewhere I could finally build something solid and maybe prove to my teenage daughter Emma that her dad wasn't a total lost cause. Uncle Silas was always the family enigma. Vanished into the high country back in 1980. Showed up at Christmas smelling like campfires and motor oil, mumbling that land holds more secrets than the trees growing on it. Everyone else wrote him off as the eccentric mountain hermit. When his attorney phoned to say I'd inherited the parcel, I sensed Uncle Silas had understood something the rest of the family never did. The land was pure magic. A small creek tumbled over polished river stones. Red-tailed hawks screamed from granite cliffs. Sharp pine resin blended with wild sage and a fragrance no bottle could ever match. An old concrete pad sat where Silas once started to build, plus a weather workshop that looked pulled straight out of a 19th century frontier photo. Just standing there breathing air that didn't reek of traffic and regret, I felt real hope for the first time in forever. I liquidated my 401k, walked away from my city gig, and began constructing a simple, honest log cabin. Nothing extravagant, just a sturdy home where Emma could spend weekends and watch her old man create something meaningful instead of watching his life fall apart. The steady thump of hammer on nail, the clean by the blade through fresh timber. After months of legal torture and paperwork, real physical labor felt like medicine. Day 3 of framing. She materialized. Victoria Ashworth stepped out a spotless white BMW X5 like some high-end corporate Grim Reaper. Mid-50s, perfectly pressed business casual outfit, gripping the leather portfolio like it was body armor. Her heels stabbed the rocky soil with parade ground rhythm. That floral perfume hit, like a chemical weapon, clashing so violently with the clean mountain breeze. It actually stung my eyes. "Excuse me," she barked, striding across my land like she held the deed. "Are you the person responsible for this unapproved construction?" I set my circular saw down, already clocking how she said person like the word tasted sour. "Marcus Brennan, building a cabin. On my land. You are Victoria Ashworth, president of the Pine Valley Homeowners Association." She flipped pages with dramatic flair. "This build violates numerous covenants. 0 permits, no architectural approval, no environmental review. Quite frankly, this primitive style is severely jeopardizing our property values." I glance around at untouched wilderness rolling to the horizon. What community? I don't see a single other house. The Pine Valley Homeowners Association oversees every residential parcel in our jurisdiction. She snapped, producing an official document. "Your uncle executed these covenants when we incorporated 6 months ago. You inherited his responsibilities." 6 months ago? I said, "Uncle Silas passed away 8 months ago." She shoved a cease and desist letter into my hand, along with an invoice for $2,500 in supposed violation penalties already accrued. "All materials must be removed within 48 hours, Victoria declared. Daily fines commence at $500 and double each week thereafter. We take our community's standards extremely seriously. The words floated in the crisp air like poison gas. Then came the real knife. Let me be direct, Mr. Brennan. Her gaze raked over my work clothes, my battered truck, my scarred hands. This isn't the kind of neighborhood where individuals from your background tend to succeed. We uphold certain standards of resident quality. I'd hate for your daughter to suffer any unnecessary humiliation. Hearing Emma's name felt like a sledgehammer to the ribs. This woman had dug into my life. Divorce, money troubles, my kid. Are you threatening my family? The question came out ice cold. Victoria's smile cut like January wind. I'm offering helpful guidance. Some fights simply aren't winnable, especially when you're clearly outgunned. She climbed back into her BMW, paused at the door. 48 hours, Mr. Brennan. Don't force us to make this unpleasant. As her taillights vanished down the switchbacks, Uncle Silas's last words rang in my skull. Never let anyone shove you off what's yours. I stared at the cease and desist, then at the half-frame cabin. Victoria Ashworth believed she held every card. She was about to learn, in the most devastating way possible, how catastrophically mistaken she was. Victoria didn't even wait the full 48 hours. Next morning, she rolled back up with a lawyer and the smug confidence of someone who'd already won. A dented Honda Civic parked behind her BMW and outclimbed the most pathetic excuse for an attorney I'd ever laid eyes on. Douglas Cranky looked like he earned his law degree from a vending machine. Off-the-rack suit, ties stained with yesterday's coffee, briefcase patched together with duct tape and prayers. Mr. Brennan, Victoria proclaimed with full theatrical venom, you are now being formally served. Cranky fumbled papers like they might bite him. Per Pine Valley HOA covenants. You currently owe $15,000 in retroactive violation fines. Furthermore, you failed to receive mandatory HOA disclosure statements during title transfer, rendering your ownership interest voidable. $15,000 for building on land I legally owned. Cranky's anxious sweat combined with Victoria's suffocating perfume into a nauseating cloud of intimidation. I'll have my attorney review these, I said, voice level. Victoria's laugh sounded like breaking glass. You can't afford counsel, Mr. Brennan. Spare yourself the humiliation. The second their vehicles disappeared, I headed straight to the county courthouse. Betty, the warm, no-nonsense clerk, helped me pull every relevant property record. Under buzzing fluorescent lights and the smell of aging paper, I found a smoking gun that made my blood run hot. Pine Valley HOA was officially created exactly 6 months earlier, 2 full months after Uncle Silas was already gone. My divorce lawyer once drilled into me, timing in legal documents is everything. And this timing was impossible. The HOA boundaries have been drawn like a bullseye, encircling my 5 acres and only 11 other houses. My parcel alone made up roughly 60% of their so-called community landmass. That's awfully convenient, Betty murmured, tracing lines on the map. Looks like somebody drew those borders just to capture your uncle's property. Deeper digging showed every single HOA board member was either related to Victoria or employed by her husband's construction firm. This wasn't neighborhood governance. It was a shakedown dressed up with meeting minutes. I'd read enough courtroom novels to know a basic truth. Dead men can't sign new contracts. And you can't be bound by covenants created after you already hold clear title. Time to hit back. Hard. I retained Sarah Kim, a ferocious real estate litigator. Her office smelled like strong coffee and unshakable resolve. This is legally laughable, Sarah said, spreading documents across the table. You cannot retroactively impose covenants on a deceased person, especially covenants formed after death and after title had already passed. I've seen HOA grip before, but this is next-level audacity. We're preparing counterclaims. Harassment, fraudulent misrepresentation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and we're digging into how they even included your parcel and boundaries created post-transfer. Victoria didn't slow down. She accelerated. 2 days later, she called an emergency HOA meeting and conveniently forgot to notify me. My neighbor Jake showed up at my porch later that night with a six-pack and the full report. With smoke drifted from distant chimneys, blending with pine and night air. Exactly why I'd fought so hard for this place. She's got everyone terrified, Jake said. Told him you're some sketchy drifter with a rap sheet. Total fiction. But fear moves faster than facts out here. Then came the online assault. Victoria launched a Pine Valley Community Safety Facebook group and uploaded my photo, lifted from an old union newsletter, next to dire warnings about transient criminals endangering our kids and tanking property values. The comments were pure venom. Remove this menace. My children aren't safe. Sheriff needs to move now. But arrogance is a hell of a drug, and Victoria overdosed. In her hurry to flex that the HOA had deep legal pockets to crush troublemakers, she publicly posted the association's financials. Those spreadsheets told a damning story. $847,000 collected in special assessments over 6 months from only 12 households. That's more than $70,000 per family. For what? 0 amenities, 0 shared infrastructure, 0 community improvements. I'd learned the hard way during my divorce. When legitimate organizations can't produce clear receipts, the money usually ends up in someone's private account. Sarah almost spat her coffee across the desk when I showed her the screenshots. She just publicly confessed to massive financial misconduct. Victoria literally gift-wrapped us a federal case. The very next morning brought her endgame play. A county inspector's truck rolled up my driveway. The inspector, visibly uneasy, handed me a stack of violation notices that would immediately halt all construction. "Sorry, man," he muttered, eyes on the ground. Word came down from way above. Somebody's got serious strings at the county level. The sour taste of corruption lingered in the air like smoke from a far-off wildfire. As his taillights faded down the mountain, one truth crystallized. Victoria had crossed into territory she could never walk back from. She'd escalated from petty civil harassment into outright government corruption, weaponizing taxpayer-funded officials to punish a personal enemy. And in doing so, she just handed me the ultimate weapon. Federal agencies don't play when it comes to financial fraud. Federal investigators go after public officials who accept bribes to terrorize private citizens. Victoria figured she was playing 4D chess while I was stuck on checkers. She had zero clue I was seconds away from flipping the whole damn board over. Victoria's next play arrived at 3 a.m. The sharp crash of shattering glass and the thick, throat-burning stink of diesel yanking me awake. I staggered outside into moonlight and found my construction zone turned into a battlefield. Someone had swung a baseball bat through my lumber stack, flinging 2X4S everywhere like oversized pickup sticks. My generator rested on its side, fuel pooling into the pine needles, that harsh chemical reek stinging my eyes. Roofing nails sparkle across the access road like lethal glitter, placed with surgical care to shred any tire stupid enough to roll over them. The message couldn't have been clearer. Victoria had abandoned the courtroom for straight-up criminal territory. By first light, I found my truck riding on 4 shredded tires and an anonymous EPA complaint sitting in my inbox, accusing me of obliterating sensitive wetlands. The so-called wetlands? A harmless seasonal trickle that had flowed across my land since long before Victoria drew her first breath. But the mind games were only warming up. Around noon, vehicles began materializing across my driveway entrance, not fully blocking it. That would have been blatantly illegal, just positioned to force me into ridiculous maneuvers just to reach my own property. When I walked up to the drivers, they claimed they were concerned citizens peacefully exercising their right to park on public roadways. The fake innocence tasted more sour than the diesel fumes still clinging to everything. Then the phony hazard signs appeared. Official-looking hazardous construction zone. Authorized personnel only. Placards popped up along the mountain road like toxic wildflowers. They looked real enough to spook my contractor Pete, who rang me in full panic mode. "Marcus, I got 3 clients asking if I'm certified for hazardous waste remediation," he said, voice tight. "Word spreading your site's contaminated. I can't lose more jobs over this." Hundreds of thousands in delayed resort profits. That night, I put my electrician know-how to serious use. Motion-activated lights, night vision cameras, full perimeter coverage. If Victoria wanted to cross into felony territory, she'd do it in crystal clear 4K. I didn't wait long for the starring role. Just past midnight, a pickup truck ghosted down my access road, headlights killed, engine murmuring through the dead quiet mountains. The driver, hoodie up but jawline unmistakable, started sloshing liquid from a gas can near my lumber stack. Every frame my cameras captured was perfect. The pour, the hesitation, the exact instant he stared straight into the lens like a raccoon frozen by high beams. Tommy Ashworth, Victoria's 20-something son, apparently blessed with the same genius-level criminal decision-making as his mother. Come morning, I delivered the knockout blow. I walked into the sheriff's office carrying USB drives loaded with time-stamped, high-res video. Tommy's midnight arson attempt, facial recognition hit, license plate match, the works. Victoria's concerned neighbor fairy tale collapsed faster than her son's story under interrogation lights. But I kept digging. The HOA's own public financial filings were a gold mine of fraud. Security consulting payments to ghost companies, landscaping services billed through Victoria's brother-in-law, who lived in Florida and hadn't touched a mower in decades, legal research fees extravagant enough to make federal judges blink. Victoria had been quietly looting the HOA treasury while setting up for the big developer windfall, double-dipping, robbing her neighbors blind today, planning to cash out on their land tomorrow. Watching Tommy's arson clip for the 5th time that evening, pine scent drifting through open windows, storm clouds gathering overhead, one truth hit hard. Victoria wasn't merely greedy. She was cornered. The resort deal almost certainly had hard deadlines, and every day I stood my ground, pushed her closer to losing millions. Trapped animals bite hardest right before the end, but they also make the loudest, sloppiest errors. Victoria's reaction to her son's arrest was immediate, savage, and totally unhinged. Next morning, a process server appeared at dawn with an emergency injunction. Victoria now alleged I was constructing an unlawful commercial facility and demanded the court order immediate demolition of everything I'd built. The paperwork claimed I planned to run a transient lodging operation catering to undesirable elements that would shred the moral character of the entire community. Fresh printer ink mingled with crisp mountain pine as I read through 15 pages of pure invention. She sought $100,000 in community damages and an immediate restraining order barring me from stepping foot on my own land. That was merely the opening act. By midday, 3 county inspectors descended like vultures. Environmental compliance, structural safety, septic inspection, all scribbling citations for phantom violations. Lead Inspector Rodriguez kept muttering apologies under his breath while snapping photos of my completely code-compliant electrical runs. "Sorry, man," he whispered. "This is coming from way over my head. Somebody's dropping serious cash to ruin your day." The bitter tang of corruption hung thicker than the afternoon fog rolling through the valley. During my divorce, I learned the pattern. When courtroom threats fizzle, the next weapon is bureaucratic suffocation. Endless inspections, impossible demands, death by paperwork avalanche. But Victoria held her cruelest strike for the finale. That afternoon, my ex-wife Linda called, voice trembling with raw anger. "Marcus, what in God's name is happening? Emma's friends are showing her Facebook posts calling you a registered sex offender. She's barricaded in her room sobbing, asking if her dad is actually a monster." My blood turned to ice. "What posts?" "Some community safety group with your picture and alerts about predators stalking kids." Total garbage. But her classmates are treating her like she's radioactive. She's asking if she's even safe coming to visit you anymore. The image of my 15-year-old daughter staring at those lies, enduring whispers and stares from friends, turned my vision red. Victoria had turned my own child into ammunition, crossing the one red line that could never be uncrossed. "It's all fabricated, Linda. I'm battling a crooked HOA that wants to seize my land for a developer payoff." "Fix it," she hissed. "Some family court judges view social media smears as endangerment to minors. This could cost you custody access." After she slammed the phone down, I sat alone in Uncle Silas's old workshop, surrounded by the comforting smell of aged lumber and faint motor oil, 40 years of family legacy pressing on my chest like granite. This fight had stopped being about land. Victoria was now threatening the only relationship that truly mattered to me. But her panic had just handed me the perfect opening. That evening, neighbor Jake showed up with urgent intel. Marcus, Victoria's group dropped another emergency alert. They're claiming you threatened to torch the whole neighborhood. They posted a photo of you holding what looks like a gun. It's actually your circular saw, angled to look threatening as hell. The Facebook comments had turned into a lynch mob. Call SWAT. Armed and dangerous. Protect the kids at all costs. But Jake leaned in with the real gold. 3 HOA families quietly reached out to me. Victoria is now threatening to jack up their property assessments if they refuse to sign affidavits against you. They're scared of her, not you. Even bigger, HOA Treasurer Beth Morrison started asking hard questions about missing funds. Victoria has been stonewalling audit requests while pushing for yet another round of special assessments. Beth discovered invoices for companies that don't exist, payments for services never rendered. She's demanding a full forensic financial review. Victoria's losing it. That was the opening I needed. I speed-dialed Sarah. Her financial shell game is cracking wide open. If we can force an emergency HOA audit before she shreds the evidence, we've got her cold. Even better, Sarah replied. False sex offender accusations on a public platform qualify as federal-level defamation and potentially criminal harassment. We can pursue charges alongside the financial fraud case. But I wanted to strike Victoria where she'd feel it deepest, straight in the bank account. Next morning, I drove to every business owned by or regularly patronized by Victoria's family. Armed with crisp screenshots of her defamatory, dangerous predator posts, I held calm, professional conversations with managers about corporate liability for amplifying libelous campaigns targeting local residents. Small mountain towns run on reputation more than money. When the local auto shop, grocery store, and hardware store all suddenly found themselves too booked up to handle any Ashworth family business, the news raced through the valley faster than a summer lightning strike. By mid-afternoon, Victoria's own mother was on the phone demanding answers for why the entire family had become persona non grata with every essential merchant in town. That evening, as heavy storm clouds piled up over the peaks and fat raindrops began drumming against my cabin windows, I sensed the momentum finally shifting in my favor. Victoria had stretched herself across too many battle lines at once while her financial crimes unraveled in plain sight. But I also knew cornered criminals rarely go quietly into the night. They torch everything on their way out. The approaching rain carried the sharp tang of wet pine sap, pulling Uncle Silas's last words back to the surface about how the land hides more secrets than the trees themselves. Tomorrow I would finally uncover what he'd meant, and Victoria Ashworth would discover that some secrets carry enough force to topple entire empires. The next morning I was levering up old floorboards in Uncle Silas's workshop when my crowbar struck metal that rang out like fate itself knocking. Under 40 years of layered sawdust, grease stains, and motor oil, I uncovered a military green steel lockbox the size of a large briefcase, sealed with a combination lock that probably hadn't been touched since the late 1970s. When I finally spun the dial to Uncle Silas's birthday, the same day he closed on this land, the lid popped open with a soft hiss. The stale, musty scent of aged paper washed over me like a time capsule breaking seal. Inside lay thick manila folders, heavy corporate seals that felt like solid gold in my palm, and enough legal documentation to bury a small law firm. But the top sheet, an incorporation certificate dated March 15th, 1998, made my fingers tremble. Brennan Holdings, LLC. Sole member, Silas J. Brennan. My uncle hadn't merely owned 5 acres of mountain heaven. 27 years earlier, he'd quietly formed a holding company and used it to execute one of the shrewdest land plays I'd ever seen. The next document laid it all bare. In 2010, during the depths of the housing crash, the original developer behind the Pine Valley subdivision went bankrupt and defaulted on massive loans. While the rest of the world fled real estate like it was radioactive, Uncle Silas moved in silently and scooped up every defaulted mortgage note for fractions of face value. Not the structures, the raw land beneath them. Every single lot in what later became Victoria's HOA domain sat on property still owned by Brennan Holdings, LLC. Homeowners had faithfully paid their mortgages for over a decade, believing they held clear title. Legally, though, they were long-term tenants. And the third-party property management firm that collected their monthly checks, it funneled every dollar straight to Brennan Holdings. The quiet explanation for how a reclusive mountain hermit lived so comfortably without ever seeming to work. I now held title to the entire neighborhood footprint. 47 houses total, 12 of them forming Victoria's self-styled HOA kingdom, all of it legally mine through inheritance. The faint ghost of Uncle Silas's pipe tobacco still hung in the workshop air, blending with the crushing weight of documents that could reshape lives. I finally understood why he'd buried this truth so deep. Secretly owning people's homes without their knowledge is the sort of revelation that shatters families and splinters entire communities. But it also meant one explosive fact. Victoria Ashworth, HOA president, harassment architect extraordinaire, had spent months collecting dues and issuing threats on land she didn't own. Her own showcase residence, headquarters for her intimidation campaign, sat on a parcel where rent payments were already 3 months delinquent. I could issue a 30-day eviction notice tomorrow morning. The lockbox bank statement showed the full picture. Monthly rent flowing into Brennan Holdings accounts. Property tax receipts paid in full, road and utility maintenance costs covered. All the things homeowners believed they were funding through their HOA assessments. Uncle Silas had been the invisible landlord of an entire subdivision, collecting rent discreetly through a management proxy while allowing residents to believe they were true owners. Every incorporation paper was authentic, bearing official state seals and notarizations from verifiable attorneys. The underlying deeds aligned perfectly with county records. The money trail was transparent as a high country stream. I sat in Uncle Silas's worn workshop chair, surrounded by the comforting smell of aged leather and buried secrets, clutching documents that handed me more leverage over Victoria Ashworth than she could ever have imagined. I could evict every HOA participant who joined her vendetta against me. I could flip the whole development to Mountain Vista Resorts and walk away a multimillionaire by next week. I could ruin lives the same way she tried to ruin mine. But Uncle Silas's parting words drifted to the dusty light. Don't let anyone push you around. He hadn't said, push back twice as hard. He'd said, don't let them push you around. There's a profound difference there. And that difference would decide exactly what kind of man I was going to become. The gravity of Uncle Silas's hidden empire settled across my shoulders like wet canvas as I laid the incorporation files out across Sarah's conference table. Fresh coffee aroma mingled with the sheer magnitude of what we'd uncovered. This isn't just solid. It's legally armored, Sarah said, inspecting the corporate seal under her bright desk lamp. Your uncle was obsessive about detail. Every filing perfect, every payment documented, every statutory requirement satisfied for nearly 3 decades. She grabbed a legal pad and began mapping strategies like a battlefield commander. Option A, immediate disclosure of landlord status and push for voluntary HOA dissolution. Clean, fast, and Victoria's power permanently. Option B, target enforcement. Terminate leases only for the core harassment group. Victoria, her immediate family, perhaps 2 or 3 lieutenants. Spare the rest. Option C, total scorched earth. Full media blast, federal probes into HOA financial crimes. Complete community implosion. I thought of Emma staring at those vicious Facebook lies, of neighbors manipulated by Victoria's fabrications, of Uncle Silas choosing silence for decades rather than wield this weapon carelessly. What about option D? I asked. Sarah's eyebrows lifted. Go on. Victoria's been robbing these people blind while lying about who actually owns the ground under their feet. What if we expose her fraud, but give the community a genuine way out? Lower rents, pathways to real ownership. Transform this poisonous HOA into something that actually supports families instead of terrorizing them. While Sarah hunted down relevant case law, I enlisted my electrician friend Jake for the practical side. We headed to his shop, where the familiar smell of copper wire, solder flux, and buzzing transformers grounded me after weeks of courtroom chaos. You're definitely recording this moment, Jake said, calibrating a high-end audio rig. When you drop a bomb this size, you want crystal clear. Clear documentation for every legal angle. Driving back in my truck, I remembered a lesson from my early apprenticeship days. The strongest electrical systems aren't the ones that throw the brightest sparks. They're the ones that deliver precisely the right amperage to accomplish the task. Too little power and nothing moves. Too much and you start fires. This moment called for surgical precision. That afternoon, I met HOA Treasurer Beth Morrison at a quiet, neutral spot, the roadside diner where apple pie scent and plain-spoken talk felt like refuge after endless legal trench warfare. I've been uneasy about the books for months, Beth admitted over coffee that tasted like resolve. Victoria keeps blocking audits while piling on record-high assessments. We funneled $847,000 in special fees this year alone, and I can't trace half of it. I slid copies of Victoria's fake invoices across the Formica tabletop. Phantom companies, ghost services, consulting charges outrageous enough to scandalize lawmakers. Beth's hands trembled as she scanned the proof. She's been embezzling while holding our homes hostage. But Marcus, even if we take her down, how do we shield families who pour their entire savings into these places? Right then I knew option D was the only moral path forward. Over the following 2 days, Sarah and I built a comprehensive presentation designed to achieve justice and offer redemption at the same time. We exposed Victoria's crimes while laying out a compassionate exit ramp for the community. Legal packets were prepared in multiple copies, secured in different locations, with duplicates already forwarded to federal investigators who specialize in HOA and real estate fraud. I also called Emma, first time since Linda's furious outburst. Her voice came through small and wounded at first, but I could hear fragile hope returning as I laid out the truth behind Victoria's smears. So, you're not actually in trouble, Dad? All that online stuff calling you dangerous, it's completely made up? Every word of it, sweetheart. And soon the whole world will see the facts. But Emma, listen close. When someone attacks you with lies, the strongest answer isn't revenge or more lies. It's delivering the truth at exactly the right instant. The community meeting was set for Friday evening at the Pine Valley Community Center. Victoria had billed it as an emergency session to confront the dangerous outsider endangering our neighborhood. She had no clue she was about to hand me the perfect platform for her own collapse. That night, sitting in my finished cabin with the creek murmuring through the pines and stars slowly igniting overhead, I felt Uncle Silas's quiet presence woven into the cool mountain air. He'd guarded this secret for decades, waiting for precise person and precise moment to use it with wisdom instead of wrath. That moment had arrived, and unlike Victoria's campaign of ruin, this truth would rebuild something stronger from the wreckage of her greed. Tomorrow evening, the truth would finally take the stand. Victoria's panic hit fever pitch when she attempted to have me involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility. Tuesday morning brought an emergency court filing shoved under my door, a petition swearing I exhibited severe mental instability and posed an imminent threat to community safety. Victoria had somehow persuaded a judge I required immediate psychiatric hold and possible long-term involuntary treatment. The sharp scent of fresh-printed legal papers clashed with my morning coffee, turning breakfast into something out of Bad Dream as I read her latest creative masterpiece. Per her affidavit, I'd been obsessively monitoring neighbors, issuing threats to incinerate homes, and displaying textbook symptoms of paranoid delusions and violent ideation. She'd attached witness statements from 3 HOA loyalists claiming I'd accosted them after dark, ranting about vast conspiracies and vowing retribution. Pure invention, yet wrapped in terrifying official formatting. By noon, the situation escalated far beyond paperwork. A caravan of pickup trucks materialized at the foot of my access road. Victoria's self-appointed citizen patrol. Ordinary neighbors clutching hunting rifles and righteous anger. They stayed just off my property line, but the intent screamed loud and clear. Cross us and face old-school mountain justice. The coppery taste of adrenaline mixed with crisp air as I observed them through binoculars from my porch. These weren't trained operatives. They were frightened people who'd been convinced I was a legitimate danger to their kids and homes. Jake rang with grimmer intel. Marcus, Victoria's brother-in-law, is the county sheriff. He's prepping to execute that mental health warrant this afternoon. Full SWAT deployment. They're classifying you as armed, unstable, and requiring heavy protocol response. My blood turned to frost. During my years as an electrician, I'd wired houses for men who'd been swatted in petty neighbor feuds. Too many of those incidents ended in body bags and tragic, accidental shootings during high-risk entries. But Victoria's escalating madness was also unexpectedly forging new allies in places I hadn't anticipated. That afternoon, Emma called, not in tears of shame this time, but burning with righteous anger. "Dad, kids at school are shoving their phones in my face with posts saying you're a terrorist plotting to shoot up the whole neighborhood. This is beyond insane. How can she just invent lies like this? Because desperate people do desperate things, sweetheart. But sometimes that desperation becomes a rope they hang themselves with." Emma's voice hardened into something fierce. She carried more of her old man steel than I'd ever fully appreciated. "What can I do to fight back? I'm not letting this lunatic tear our family apart with garbage lies." While Victoria was busy branding me a deranged threat, she was simultaneously scrambling to erase her financial footprints. Sarah's private investigator uncovered records showing Victoria had pulled $127,000 in cash withdrawals from HOA accounts over the previous 2 weeks alone. The withdrawals were supposedly earmarked for enhanced security consulting and emergency legal defense costs. Even more damning, she'd been strong-arming HOA members into signing loyalty declarations, vowing not to assist any external investigators attempting to dismantle our community. 3 separate families had quietly contacted Sarah, petrified of Victoria but ready to break ranks if protected. Victoria's nuclear option imploded spectacularly. The mental health commitment petition demanded supporting medical documentation. She'd attached a supposed psychological evaluation from Dr. Richard Peton diagnosing me with classic antisocial personality disorder featuring violent propensities. The only problem? Dr. Peton had been deceased for 6 full months. Sarah's paralegal unearthed the death certificate during routine verification. Victoria had forged the entire assessment, lifting a dead psychiatrist's letterhead and signature stamp to create fake professional testimony. That one reckless forgery had instantly escalated her exposure from civil wrongdoing to federal felony document fraud, carrying a potential 10-year prison sentence. "She's coming completely unglued," Sarah said, scanning the bogus evaluation with disbelief. This kind of reckless criminal escalation screams someone staring down catastrophic financial ruin. The resort development deal must have a movable deadline she's terrified of missing. But Victoria wasn't done self-destructing. Thursday night delivered her most catastrophic blunder yet. Frustrated by the stalled SWAT response, apparently judges frown on blatantly forged medical records, Victoria opted for direct action. My upgraded security cameras captured her creeping onto my property just after midnight, clutching what looked like a jerrycan of accelerant and a fistful of matches. Her obvious intent: ignite a small blaze near my lumber stack, then dial 911 to report that I was destroying evidence of my criminal enterprises. The poetic justice was exquisite. Victoria Ashworth, who'd spent weeks labeling me an arsonist, was now literally committing arson in a bid to frame me for arson. But my new motion-activated floodlight snapped on the instant she breached property line, transforming midnight darkness into glaring daylight and bathing her in harsh white light from 3 separate camera angles. There she stood frozen in my driveway, gasket in one hand, road flares in the other, illuminated like a stage performer caught mid-act. Her scream of shock and fury rolled across the valley loud enough to rouse hibernating wildlife 3 ridges over. As I watched her bolt back to her BMW in panic, one truth crystallized. Victoria had just gifted me the single most devastating piece of evidence imaginable. Crystal clear video proof of her attempting the precise crime she'd spent weeks accusing me of plotting. Tomorrow's community meeting had just become exponentially more explosive than I'd imagined. Victoria's last frantic play arrived with sirens wailing, lights flashing, and the full spectacle of a media storm capable of obliterating reputations forever. Friday morning I woke to thundering helicopter blades and the sharp, choking stench of diesel exhaust from a dozen emergency vehicles blocking my access road. Peering through cabin windows, I saw news vans, sheriff's deputies, and what appeared to be half the county's first response apparatus establishing a cordon around my land. My phone vibrated nonstop with calls from journalists, all asking some version of the same loaded question. How do you respond to claims that you're holding the neighborhood hostage with improvised explosive devices? Explosive devices? I stepped onto the porch holding my coffee mug, and instantly felt 6 red laser dots dancing across my chest. Marcus Brennan. Sheriff Davidson's voice crackled over a bullhorn. You are surrounded. Exit slowly with hands clearly visible. The surreal metallic bite of fear blended with crisp mountain air as I realized Victoria had detonated her final weapon. She convinced authorities I was a domestic terrorist gearing up for armed confrontation. Jake's urgent whisper came through my earpiece. Marcus, don't move a muscle. Victoria filed reports claiming you threatened to bomb the community center tonight. She's got photos of you with suspicious packages and statements from 3 witnesses. The packages? Bags of concrete mix for my cabin foundation. The witnesses? Likely the same phantom sources from her Ford psych eval. But this time Victoria had badly misjudged law enforcement's willingness to swallow her story whole. Sheriff Davidson advanced cautiously toward my porch, his face showing more chagrin than menace. Marcus, I know this feels over the top, but we got federal eyes on us over alleged credible terrorist threats. I need permission to search the property so we can put this to bed. Search all you want, Sheriff, but you might want to review last night's security footage first. I passed him the USB drive loaded with Victoria's midnight arson attempt. His expression cycled through shock, disbelief, and grim realization as he watched the HOA president, on camera, attempting to torch the very property she'd accused me of wanting to destroy. Well, he muttered, exhaling heavily, that's going to torpedo her credibility in a major way. While the bomb technician spent 3 tedious hours verifying that concrete mix was, in fact, just concrete mix, Sarah raced to file emergency motions seeking Victoria's immediate arrest for false police reports, attempted arson, hoax terrorist threats, federal-level offenses that could lock her away for decades. But the media frenzy was only ramping up. By early afternoon, Denver news crews had descended, lured by headlines of a mountain standoff involving an alleged domestic extremist. Victoria, ever the opportunist, cast herself as the brave community guardian shielding innocent families from a violent radical. Positioned before cameras in flawless makeup and rehearsed tears, she delivered a gripping narrative of a tranquil neighborhood terrorized by an unhinged outsider bent on destroying civilized life. This man has menaced our children, shattered our peace, and now appears ready to unleash mass violence rather than comply with basic community rules. Victoria wept into a cluster of microphones. We simply want our neighborhood restored. The performance would have earned an Oscar nomination for Best Dramatic Fiction. Yet Victoria's media blitz contained one fatal oversight. In her eagerness to play victim, she'd accepted multiple live interviews without legal counsel, and live TV offers no chance to edit out inconvenient realities. Channel 7 investigative reporter Maria Santos had come prepared. During what Victoria assumed would be an easy, sympathetic segment, Maria dropped the bomb casually. Mrs. Ashworth, public records indicate your HOA has collected nearly $850,000 in special assessments this year alone. Can you clarify how those funds were allocated? Victoria's poised facade flickered like a candle in a gust. Well, we've incurred substantial legal costs addressing this dangerous individual, but the legal expenses documented in your filings total only $23,000. Where did the remaining $827,000 disappear to? The silence that followed stretched 3 agonizing seconds on air, an eternity in broadcast time. Victoria's mouth worked soundlessly as her mind scrambled for a non-incriminating escape. That's confidential community business, she finally choked out. Confidential? Mrs. Ashworth, you're discussing this on live television while accusing your neighbor of terrorism. Financial transparency seems directly relevant to your credibility here. By nightfall, the narrative had flipped dramatically from mountain hermit threatens community to HOA president accused of massive embezzlement while fabricating terror hoaxes. Social platforms lit up with questions about Victoria's financial stewardship and the suspiciously timed escalation of her attacks. As the final news van rumbled down the mountain, leaving only tire ruts and fading diesel fumes in its wake, one fact became crystal clear. Victoria had just committed public career suicide on live broadcast. Tonight's community meeting would no longer center on her accusations against me. It would demand her explanations to neighbors whose savings she'd been quietly looting. The predator had become the prey. The Pine Valley Community Center had never held a crowd this large. 89 people crammed into a room built for perhaps 60, news cameras lining the walls, County officials claiming the front row like a panel of judges at a tribunal. The thick atmosphere inside the Pine Valley Community Center felt like it could choke a person. Nervous sweat blending with the stale aroma of ancient coffee pots and decades-worn industrial carpet. Victoria stood behind the podium like a field commander rallying soldiers on the eve of war. Her PowerPoint deck was boldly titled, "Protecting Our Community, the Marcus Brennan Threat Assessment." She dressed for total domination. Crisp business suit, flawless makeup, voice carrying with a polished rejection that could make Broadway directors jealous. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, advancing to a slide feature in my half-built cabin. "Tonight we confront the immediate and ongoing danger Marcus Brennan poses to our tranquil neighborhood." I sat quietly in the back row, wearing my cleanest flannel work shirt, clutching a leather document folder packed with enough legal explosives to flatten entire ranges. Sarah was beside me, eyes flicking her phone every few seconds as federal investigators fed her live updates on Victoria's embezzlement trail. Victoria's presentation was a textbook exercise in psychological warfare. Carefully cropped photos of my menacing construction site, screenshots of my supposedly threatening online posts, actually innocent electrical project photos I'd share to help fellow tradespeople, graphs claiming property value drops in neighborhoods with transient residents. This individual currently owes our community $97,000 in accrued fines and litigation costs, Victoria declared, her tone swelling with moral outrage. He has repeatedly issued violent threats against families, attempted to terrorize our children, and just yesterday drew scrutiny from federal authorities over suspected terrorist intentions. The room responded with low, uneasy murmurs of agreement. These were fundamentally decent people who'd been spoon-fed months of carefully curated falsehoods, and Victoria's delivery was slick enough to convince a desert dweller to buy oceanfront property. Moreover, she pressed on, clicking to a glossy financial slide, Mr. Brennan's stubborn presence endangers a transformative economic opportunity that would enrich every household here. Mountain Vista Resorts has proposed a $50 million partnership that promises hundreds of jobs and dramatic property value appreciation. There was the true motive laid bare in public, captured on 3 separate news cameras and witnessed by county officials in the front row. Victoria had just confessed on a record that her entire vendetta was about forcing my land into developers' hands. She opened the floor for victim impact statements, and 3 carefully prepped neighbors delivered synchronized, tear-streaked monologues about living in constant fear because of my presence. It felt scripted like a low-budget community theater production. Then Victoria committed the fatal error that would echo through her nightmares forever. Does anyone else wish to voice concerns about this dangerous outsider threatening our way of life? I rose slowly, folder tucked under my arm. Actually, I do. Victoria's polished smile cracked like thin ice. You're not part of this community. You have no standing to address us. On the contrary, Victoria, I said evenly, walking toward the front with measured steps, I believe you'll discover I have more standing in this room than anyone present. The murmurs shifted from supportive to bewildered. Victoria's complexion drained to the color of dirty snow as I reached the podium. My name is Marcus Brennan. I announced clearly for the microphones and cameras, and I am the sole member of Brennan Holdings, LLC. I opened a folder and lifted Uncle Silas's incorporation papers high enough for every lens to catch them, which makes me the legal landlord of every single parcel in this entire subdivision. The silence that descended was absolute. You could hear individual pulses hammering. Then the room detonated into pandemonium. Gasps, overlapping shouts, chairs scraping as people whipped around to stare at neighbors they suddenly realized were fellow renters. Victoria lunged for my documents like a shipwreck victim clawing for driftwood. This is impossible. This is our neighborhood. We own our homes. You own the buildings, I corrected calmly, spreading the property deeds across the podium like a winning poker hand. But the underlying land has belonged to me, through my uncle's holding company, for the past 27 years. Every mortgage-style payment you thought went to your lender, it was rent, quietly forwarded to Brennan Holdings. Every HOA fee you've been collecting, you've been embezzling funds for managing land you never owned. Sheriff Davidson stepped forward, face set in grim comprehension. Mrs. Ashworth, You've been assessing and collecting association dues on property legally owned by Mr. Brennan. Victoria's composure shattered completely. You can't do this. I've devoted years to building this community. You're just some transient who doesn't belong here. Actually, I said, producing the rent ledger printouts, you're 3 months delinquent on your own lease, giving me immediate grounds for a 30-day eviction notice. The room exploded again. Victoria lunged wildly for the papers, shrieking about property rights and community standards until Sheriff Davidson had no choice but to physically restrain her. But I'm not here for vengeance, I called over the uproar. I'm here to propose partnership. Those who actively participated in the harassment campaign have 30 days to vacate. For everyone else, your rent is immediately halved, and we're going to build a genuine community together, starting now. As federal agents moved in to place Victoria under arrest for wire fraud and related felonies, her final scream ricocheted through the valley. You can't do this to me. I am this community. But real communities aren't forged through theft and deception. They're built on truth. 3 months later, I sat on my cabin porch watching neighborhood kids chase each other across what used to be Victoria's off-limits common area when Emma pulled up for her weekend visit wearing the biggest grin I'd seen in years. Dad, I got accepted to Colorado State. Full ride scholarship, she announced, throwing her arms around me in a hug that carried the faint scent of her mom's shampoo and pure teenage optimism. And you know what sealed it for the admissions team? My essay about how my father showed me real strength isn't revenge. It's turning corruption's ashes into something stronger and better. Victoria Ashworth was serving an 18-month federal sentence, plus ordered to pay $150,000 in restitution to the families she defrauded. 6 of her most aggressive accomplices had quietly relocated after their leases were terminated and their actions permanently documented. The other 41 residents had embraced a new community vision with an enthusiasm that caught even me off guard. Barbecue smoke curled from Jake's backyard, where half the neighborhood had gathered for our now monthly potluck. The same folks who once saw me as a menace now dropped off casseroles, borrowed my tools without hesitation, and sought my input on everything from wiring upgrades to handling teenage rebellion. Fear evaporates fast once its source vanishes, Sarah noted with a satisfied smile as she joined Emma and me on the porch, beer in hand. Our working partnership had quietly deepened into something richer, rooted in shared respect and the thrill of dismantling systemic corruption together. The transformation went beyond anything I'd dare hope for. With rents slashed to half their former mortgage equivalents, families suddenly had breathing room for home renovations, college funds, and real emergency savings. Mrs. Peterson launched a thriving community garden in the very space where Victoria's aesthetic compliance squad used to fine people for planting the wrong shade of marigold. Kids who'd once been warned to avoid me now knocked on my door for help with science fair projects, wide-eyed at the story of the electrician, who outmaneuvered powerful adults using nothing but patience, paperwork, and the truth. But the deepest change came through the Silas Brennan Community Justice Fund, seeded with funds clawed back from Victoria's schemes. The fund now offered pro bono legal support to families battling abusive HOAs across 3 states, and it already helped uncover parallel financial fraud in 17 other communities. We just got another call yesterday, Sarah said, glancing at her phone. Family in Oregon facing the identical playbook. City Council pushing to condemn their century-old farm for an Amazon distribution center, using the same phony community benefit excuses Victoria peddle for her resort. Emma looked up from her scholarship acceptance letter, eyes flashing with the same fierce determination she'd inherited. Are we going to help them, Dad? We're damn well going to try, sweetheart. Uncle Silas taught me that true power lifts communities up. It doesn't tear them down. The financial restructuring proved surprisingly restorative. Instead of squeezing maximum profit, I offered longtime residents the chance to buy their land parcels at cost, with zero-interest financing through Justice Fund. Most chose to stay and become actual homeowners for the first time in decades. The development rights Victoria had dangled before Mountain Vista Resorts, I transferred them outright to the Colorado Conservation Trust, ensuring the surrounding wilderness would stay pristine for Emma's future kids and their kids after that. Property values didn't collapse. They actually climbed, fueled by the cooperation and goodwill that replaced Victoria's iron-fisted control. Turns out people will pay a premium to live where neighbors lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. As purple twilight draped the peaks, I thought back on Uncle Silas's quiet wisdom. He'd guarded the land ownership secret for decades, waiting for someone with the right character and the right timing to wield that power for good instead of greed. Some secrets are too hazardous for weak hands, but become tools of justice in steady ones. Emma was flipping through college brochures under the porch light when Sarah passed me a thick envelope postmarked from Portland. That Oregon family I mentioned, word of our win reached them. They're asking if the man who dismantled a corrupt HOA can help save their family farm from corporate land grabs. I opened the envelope, inhaling the clean scent of fresh hope and fresh battles ahead. Another David and Goliath chapter. Another shot to show that regular people armed with grit and truth can still topple crooked systems. Ready for your old man to take on City Hall next round, Emma? Her grin flashed pure mischief laced with fierce pride. Let's do it, Dad. But this time, I wanted on the legal research. As we sketched plans for the next fight, children's laughter rolled across the valley where Victoria's venomous threats once echoed. Sometimes the most complete victory isn't destruction. It's creating something so solid and beautiful that the memory of ugliness fades away entirely. Drop a comment below with your own HOA horror story. You're not alone in these fights, and sharing your experience could give strength to other families battling the same kind of corruption. If this story helped you see your rights more clearly against predatory homeowners associations, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications for HOA stories, where we shine light on power-drunk neighbors and the everyday legal tools regular people can use to push back hard. Next week, when the city council tried to seize our family farm for an Amazon warehouse, they had no clue about great-grandpa's forgotten mining claims. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If this episode had you laughing, shaking your head, or fist-pumping at the comeback, drop a like and share your thoughts below. We bring you fresh HOA Karen chaos and epic neighborhood showdowns every week. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next wild true story.